It is Graham here, living the dream in 2022 on our last day here in rural Tennessee, which also means it's our last day here in the United States. This video is going to be our last in our two-step, two states mini-series, and it's going to be a pure trip report, and it's going to be a trip report on board Delta in premium economy from Atlanta across to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I'm however not that sure how different this video is going to be from the first trip report as part of this two-step, two states series, because of course that was on board Delta in premium economy from Amsterdam across to Detroit in Michigan. Anyway, I'm sure that I'll be able to show you something a little bit different on board this transatlantic trip in the opposite direction. So let's get on board the Delta Airbus A350 and see. You joined Fiona and I where we left off in the last video, transiting between Concourse C and Concourse E on the underground railway at Atlanta's Hartsfield International Airport. It's mid-April 2022, and as you can see, we were still forced to wear face masks right at the tail end of the pandemic. And it was around this time that my GoPro battery finally gave up. After recording plenty of content for our last video, which was of course the trip report from Knoxville down to Atlanta on board a Delta Boeing 717. So if you want to see how we get on board that said Boeing 717 of Delta in Comfort Plus, just go back one video. Anyway, back to the current video, and Fiona and I are now in Concourse E at Atlanta, heading towards the gate where our Delta Airbus A350 awaited to take us back across the Atlantic to Amsterdam Schiphol. Of course, travelling in premium economy, we'd no access to the lounge, and while there were plenty of options to eat here at Concourse E at Atlanta, Fiona and I had eaten a substantial lunch when in Knoxville just over 2 hours earlier, so our plan was simply to head to the gate. And if you're wondering about our status with Delta, quite frankly, we don't have any. At the time of recording this video, I believe that Delta owned 49% of Virgin Atlantic. So on this trip to the United States, we were using our Virgin Flying Club frequent flyer cards. And when we checked in at Knoxville, we'd realised that we had made Virgin Silver status. And at a little over 9 weeks from the time I recorded this particular video, we'd be travelling transatlantic again, this time on board Virgin Atlantic in premium economy. All of that is of course to come in a future video. It was strangely a full fare premium economy ticket between London Heathrow and Montego Bay. But I've no idea what that upcoming flight will mean to our Virgin Flying Club status. I guess I should say all of that to come in a future video. Anyway, as you can see, we've arrived at rather a packed gate. There were absolutely no seats to be had anywhere in this gate area, so that was pretty disappointing. And what was more disappointing was that our flight was delayed, and that was going to potentially cause Fiona and I a problem when we arrived back in Amsterdam tomorrow morning. Because if all had gone to plan, we only had 55 minutes between landing in Schiphol and catching our KLM flight back to Glasgow. As usual, we got absolutely no information from the Delta gate agents on why there was a delay. However, I'm going to make an assumption that there was an issue with the crew, because we saw them boarding the aircraft less than 30 minutes before we started to board. And as usual, Delta boarded strictly in group order, starting with those requiring extra assistance and then US military. They then moved on to those travelling in Delta 1, which is of course their business class cabin, and then it was us travelling in premium economy, or premium select as Delta calls it. Anyway, as you can see, boarding was a pretty slow process, and all told, I think our delay was around 1 hour, putting our connection at Amsterdam very unlikely. The next KLM to Glasgow from Amsterdam was at 3:30 p.m. Sunday afternoon, so that was going to give Fiona and I another 6 hours at Schiphol. Oh, how much we were looking forward to that. And if you want to see that trip report on board a Delta Airbus A350 from Amsterdam Schiphol across to Detroit in Michigan, go back to video number 186. Back to today's trip report, Fiona and I were starting to get comfortable on these bulkhead seats in the Premium Select cabin on board the Delta Airbus A350-900. As you can see, we did get an amenity kit in Premium Select, but I'm not sure picking bulkhead seats was that great an idea. The biggest problem was, of course, storage. Because there wasn't a seat back pocket, I found it very difficult, in fact impossible, to store an iPad. I was trying to finish a series from the BBC iPlayer called The Tourist, so I downloaded all of the episodes onto my iPad before making the journey out to Michigan 2 weeks earlier. And on that Airbus A350, Fiona's seat was broken. And here in Atlanta this evening, we'd picked up yet another delay. Yes, you guessed it guys, caused by another broken seat in Premium Economy. Anyway, as you can see, we finally did get underway, but it was over an hour late. As you can see, Atlanta's Hartsfield International Airport really is the home of Delta Airlines here in the United States. And while of course Detroit, Minneapolis and Seattle are also Delta hubs, Atlanta is clearly their home. Jumping over to flight radar 24, we'll be taking off today in a westerly direction before making our way up the eastern seaboard of the United States, overhead New York City, and then Boston, Massachusetts, before heading into Canadian airspace, overhead Nova Scotia, before starting our transatlantic crossing overhead Labrador and Newfoundland, no doubt talking to Gander Oceanic Control. We would then approach Europe, making landfall overhead Donegal in Ireland, before crossing my spiritual home turf, of course being Northern Ireland, overhead Belfast, then crossing the Irish Sea overhead the Isle of Man, before making landfall just to the north of Liverpool in Lancashire. We would then leave English airspace again overhead Hull and Humberside, crossing just to the north of the Wash, making our way across the North Sea and therefore starting our descent towards Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where we would be landing in a southerly direction, unfortunately on the runway that happens to be the furthest away from the Schiphol terminal, referred to locally as Rotterdam North, and with its own control tower operating that part of Amsterdam Schiphol International Airport. Our taxi to the terminal was probably going to be somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, meaning our connection flight to Glasgow was looking even more unlikely. But as we made our way out to the runway at Atlanta, none of that was bothering Fiona and I right now. That was a problem for tomorrow morning. I think from memory that the flight was approximately 7.5 hours from wheels up to wheels down. And as I said earlier in the video, I absolutely regretted choosing these bulkhead seats with next to no storage at all, and the in-flight entertainment screens having to pull out of the seats rather than being positioned in the seat in front. This meant that there was less room. But as with all seats in Premium Select on board the Delta Airbus A350, the tray table pulled out of the seat itself. And of course I used the tray table initially for my iPad, while I enjoyed the last episode of The Tourist on the BBC iPlayer. Dinner was served shortly after, and Fiona, that was chicken and mashed potatoes. I chose the vegetarian option, which on this flight was ravioli. And while I do accept that it is a pretty uninspiring aeroplane meal, it actually was very tasty. But nowhere near as inspiring or as tasty as the Thai green curry that we had on the flight out from Amsterdam to Detroit 2 weeks earlier. So while Fiona tucked into her even less inspiring quinoa salad, I checked out dessert, which on this flight was a cookie. The upshot, guys, was that the catering on board Delta was certainly a lot better out of Amsterdam than Atlanta. However, Miller Lite was on offer, so I was very happy. If you were to ask me, is the food on this flight any better than I would have got on premium economy on board British Airways? I'd have to say, based on this flight, they're pretty equally stacked. But as I did say when we were back at the gate area in Atlanta, Fiona and I will be travelling on board Virgin Atlantic in premium economy very soon. So watch out for that trip report, and let's see how Virgin Atlantic competes. But with this transatlantic flight taking place in mid-April 2022, our night on board this Delta Airbus A350 was very short. And of course, roll forward 7 to 8 weeks and it would be even shorter. I'm always asked if I actually sleep on board these transatlantic flights heading eastbound towards Europe. The simple answer is, guys, I rarely do. Not even on board business class when you've got a life flight bed. And of course, in 2020, 21 and here in 22, it was made even harder by the fact we were being forced to wear masks. Breakfast was this egg muffin and a cup of tea for Fiona and a cup of coffee for myself. Again, it's pretty standard aeroplane fare, and I'd have to go back to 2019 and review my premium economy flight on board British Airways in the 787-9 Dreamliner from Phoenix to London Heathrow to compare what I got for breakfast on board British Airways. To be honest, guys, from memory, it's probably very similar. We will be reviewing British Airways on the channel a little bit later on this year, and that will be on board a British Airways 777-300ER going transatlantic in one of the brand new club suites, a product I've yet to experience or review on the channel. However, British Airways have already made a few changes and even cancelled one of our sectors on that particular trip, so I've no idea how it's going to end up in reality. Anyway, as you can see, we're approaching the western coastline of the Netherlands, so you're going to be glad to hear that I'm going to shut up for a while as we make our approach into Amsterdam Schiphol.
Amsterdam, this is the terminating point of our flight. For your continued comfort and safety, it be necessary for you to remain seated until the captain has brought the jet to the gate and turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. This will be your only indication that it is safe for you to move about the cabin to collect your personal belongings. When opening overhead bins, we do ask that you please use caution. Your items do tend to shift during flight. If you are in need of ground information here for baggage claim or any other connections, there will be Delta agents greeting this flight who will be more than happy to assist you. In the next several days, you may receive an email survey from Delta. We welcome and value your feedback.
As the flight attendant said, welcome to Amsterdam Schiphol, or should I say Rotterdam North, because it's going to take us nearly 20 minutes to taxi to the terminal. At around this point in the taxi, I turned my iPhone on. I got very excited because it looked like we'd arrived an hour earlier. But bless Vodafone Netherlands, because 10 minutes later, the iPhone reset itself to the correct time. And what that meant for Fiona and I, when we actually arrived at the gate, we would have 10 minutes to transfer between this flight and our next flight to Glasgow. I know, guys, it looked like we're about to spend another 5 or 6 hours in this airport, as we had done 2 weeks before. But on the plus side, guys, look at the weather. It was absolutely gorgeous on this particular Sunday morning. As we exited the Delta Airbus A350 at Amsterdam Schiphol, on the positive side, we had landed at the D gates, and given that I already knew KLM were scheduling to use one of their Embraer Cityhopper aircraft on our flight across to Glasgow, I was pretty darn sure we would be leaving from D6. After years of travelling through this airport on a near weekly basis, I knew that unless things had changed, the non-Schengen KLM Cityhopper flights all departed from D6, which is a bus gate. And as a result of asking this lovely KLM gate agent, it was confirmed that our KLM flight to Glasgow was departing from D6. So that meant that Fiona and I had less than 10 minutes to transit between flights. So with us now en route to gate D6 at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, this is where I'm going to bring to a close episode 11 of our two-step Two States adventure. When I started planning this mini-series, Amsterdam Schiphol, where I expected this series would start and end. So the next episode, being episode 12, will be the final video in this mini-series. As I bring this episode to a close, the big question I'm going to leave you all with: will Fiona and I make the 09:30 KLM flight to Glasgow this morning, or will we have to hang around Schiphol for another 6 hours waiting on the 3:30 this afternoon? So as we approach gate D6, you know what you're going to have to do. Of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon to be notified when the next video is published. And as we descend the stairs into the D gate, bus gate area here at Amsterdam Schiphol, it's time for me to say thank you very much for watching.